Hello to people who are just joining us. My name's Kate from The Big Draw. We're just waiting for our two special guests, and there's one of them already.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Okay, thank you.
So people are just, if you look at the top, you can see we've already got 12, 14 people in already, 16. So as you can see, Damian's already joined us. We're just waiting for our other special guest who's just coming in now. Just one moment. Yay! So we're all here. We're all here.
Fantastic.
So can you hear me okay, both of you?
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Good. Sounds all right. And can somebody who is just joining us on the call now, could a few of you just give me the thumbs up? Can you hear all three of us okay? Is the sound all right? Anybody? Anybody give me a thumbs up on the call? Anybody at all?
We've got lots of hearts. I'm guessing
We've got loads of hearts. Okay. Nobody's going to say yes or no. Well, I'm assuming that you can hear us, all of you. Yeah, lots of hearts. I'm sure they're not for me. Oh yeah, we got a yep. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you to everyone for joining us. We are just about on time, just slightly over. My name's Kate Mason. I'm the director of a charity, arts charity called The Big Draw. And we know that we're likely to have individuals joining us from around the world. We often do on our calls. So for people who don't know The Big Draw, we call ourselves a visual literacy charity, and we champion the power of drawing and visual literacy across all different disciplines in different ways. So that's what we do. We have lots of different projects and platforms that we use to channel that message through. And one of our wonderful partners is Concepts app. And I'm delighted that joining us on the call today, we have David Brittain, who is from Concepts app. And we also have another very special guest who is Damian Parker on the call today. And Damian, I was going to say the school, but I would be really ashamed because I'm officially Welsh, but I might say the name wrong and then I'd feel really stupid. So I'm going to ask, if I could ask you first, Damian, just to introduce yourself, and then it'd be great maybe, Dave, if you could say a few words about yourself. So to save my embarrassment of my awful my awful pronunciation, can I hand just over to you, Damian, to do a quick introduction, say who you are?
Okay, so my name is Damian Parker. I'm a design technology teacher specialising in engineering. I've taught for 26 years and I'm head of faculty for art, design and technology at St. Cyres School. I'm also an Apple Distinguished Educator, and my role in the faculty is to lead design technology, art, photography, and to train staff and students in the use of Apple technology for both teaching and learning.
That's very succinct, but covers an awful lot, really, doesn't it? So we'll be digging into some of that. And David, can I ask you just to say a few quick words to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. So my name is David Brittain. I'm one of the co-founders of Concepts, which is a sketching app that's been built from the ground up for tablets that support a stylus. So things like the iPad, Samsung Galaxy tablets, or Microsoft Surface devices. So we've kind of grown up on those modern new tablet devices, and we're focused on sketching, visual thinking, visual communication. It's a kind of very Swiss Army knife kind of tool that supports many different forms of visual thinking and communication. And yeah, excited to be here today for this conversation. The work the Big Draw does is something we're huge fans of, supporting visual literacy and the value of sketching and visual thinking, and also with Damian and the great work he does in the classroom in kind of bringing a new generation into this, where often schools discourage sketching and drawing. It's great to see Damian encouraging it and pushing it broadly through, all of the subjects that get taught at his school. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much. That's a brilliant introduction, and also really helps contextualize why we're all here as well. So really the reason that that Damian really got on the radar, if you like, at the Big Draw was really through you, David, wasn't it? Concepts have already had a relationship with the school, and we'll be hearing a bit more for people on the call about really quite impressive, pretty pioneering approach really of pedagogies and what's happening in that school. And there's not many schools that are doing it. So, but the reason I think that we're interested at the Big Draw, and we'll be talking more to Damian in a second about why are we talking to you, Damian, really, is we do a lot at the Big Draw. We talk to people from all different disciplines and sector about visual literacy, why it's important, why creativity is important in thinking, in problem solving, in critical thinking, why it helps arm people for the future across business and design and engineering and maths. It's not just about the arts subjects. So why these things are important. And I think that we often are asked things, a lot of people are quite polarized around analog drawing or mark making with meaning and digital. And we would always say, absolute rubbish. There's no reason why they can't work together. There's a lovely synergy there. They dovetail together. You can come in with one and then maybe it sort of transforms in a lovely, beautiful, mercurial way into something else. Or maybe you come in at the digital angle and then it becomes analog and it ends up back on paper. So there's a lovely route there either way. It's very fluid. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. But there's also something about visual literacy and mark making that is incredibly, well, it's interdisciplinary learning. So it's an amazing tool, I think, for educators to be able to impart knowledge in a way that is accessible, is creative, and isn't just about sort of handing down and looking down. It's like we are the great knowledge keepers. It's much more about co-learning, co-curation, if you like, co-collaboration. It's all the co's, and it's really doing it on a level with the children, the young people, and bringing them with you on that journey. And they're learning about things they don't even realise until afterwards, where they're thinking, oh, well, I just thought I was doing art and design class, and actually they've been doing engineering or physics or whatever. So I think that there's a beautiful fluidity there, that interdisciplinary approach. And these are some of the reasons why I became very interested in the work that you are doing, Damian, at the school. And I think why it's quite unique, and the role of the iPad, and obviously Concepts plays a key role in that. So I think you call it one-to-one, and maybe if I could bring you back in here and we could start to get into the meat of the conversation. So would you be able to talk a bit more, Damian, just about what it is that the approach that the school that you teach at takes in terms of how you're using Concepts, how you're embedding iPads into the learning and the pedagogies across the school?
Okay, so like you just mentioned, we're what is called a one-to-one school, which means that every student that comes to our school has an iPad when they start, and that iPad goes with them all day, every day. So we were looking at ways that we could become fully digital. Now, before we had the iPads, we already had transitioned from traditional portfolios into the digital portfolio. We were using specialist CAD software for things like final renderings, or using 3D printing or laser cutters. So there was that gap in the middle that we were still using traditional sketching, which we wanted to fill. So, we started investigating ways that we could utilize these iPads fully. And my main aim was to become fully digital, which would then allow the students to, have full access to learning outside the classroom, so that, they're not confined to the 1 hour that you had during that day. If they didn't feel comfortable, that they could then go home and, just open their iPad and continue with it when they felt ready. So that's what made us start to look into the sketching apps and brought us into Concepts. Now, we trialed many other apps at the start, and what we found was Concepts suited our needs, because it was the simplicity, it wasn't overcrowded, and we could really see the benefits with sort of pushing it to the future, with maybe linking it to running the laser cutter or taking it into a CAD package. So that's when we started getting in contact with David, and we started working with the students from there, really. So it was to make the iPad and an Apple Pencil or a stylus that their everyday sort of pencil case, and move away from traditional methods, and also looking, like you did mention earlier, about future skills and getting them ready for university and sort of design jobs, or even just college. So that was the aim.
Yeah, and I think that'd be a really nice thing that we can thread back to a little bit, maybe towards the end of the chat, in terms of maybe just opening up a little bit in terms of just between the three of us or anybody on the call in terms of what we might think actually those useful skills are for the young kids that are going to be coming through that pipeline, because it's not always just the very traditional, well, it's not always the very traditional way of doing things, is it? And they may need a whole range of other soft skills and communication skills and collaborative skills and everything else if they're going to have a sort of a rounded, happy, successful career and a chance of getting a reasonable salary. You know, I mean, I find that when we go into schools or bring people in from different disciplines, engineers, designers, artists, people going to school, the kids they're incredibly tuned in, and they will ask good questions. They will ask, you know, is it something I can do? How much time do I need to invest in it? Will I earn enough money? You know, they do ask these really practical questions. They're pretty clued up. But so we can come back to some of those sort of future skills, if you like, and you know, the landscape in probably 10, 15 years time will be very different to where we are now, because things are moving so quickly. But going back to this idea of sort of fully digital and what that really means, Damian. So, and maybe just for the people on the call, just to clarify, and again, being mindful that we might be working across time zones and different schooling systems, what age group are you working with generally?
So the age group that we work with is from 12 to 18.
And are you finding that the approach that you're taking is really flexible, and that actually it's easily applicable whether you're working with the 12-year-olds or you're working with the sort of 15 to 18-year-olds?
So originally, when we tried to introduce concepts, what we did, we started with the older students, the 17, 18-year-olds, and we also started a after-school club with the younger students. Now, because I'm also a learning coach, or a form tutor, as some schools call them, I was very fortunate to have a very excitable class of 12-year-olds who were very keen to just absorb everything. So we introduced them to concepts, and we gave them a couple of stylus, and we just started some tutorials after school. And you know, at some point they were so keen to work, we just couldn't get them out the door at the end of the day, but they just thrived with it. And so what we were finding then, that we could start to filter that into different classes, and you know, sort of look at where we could introduce it to other subjects maybe. So we specialized in the engineering side first and the product design, and as soon as we started to get a handle of it and realize that yes, this does work, then we sort of push this across the faculty to the textiles department, to product design, and even the photography area is now using concepts. So yeah, that's how it's sort of filtered in really. Now, whenever we sort of look at it, you know, introducing a new technology, we'll always look at the impact. Now, if it doesn't have impact, if it's not going to improve the teaching and the learning, then we will not use it. So, you know, we're always very cautious at the start to use the technology just for the sake of technology. It has to have a benefit to the students. And very quickly we found that yes, we could use it with all age groups, as long as obviously they had the correct training and guidance. And then we were pushing across different staff and getting a lot of positive feedback there as well.
Yeah. And I mean, it may be that there's people on the call, or there's teachers watching who might be more interested in the model that you're doing. But I mean, one of the things that when we've spoken before about this, and I was interested, I mean, and I know just from when we're working with schools and educators, is a lot of, I mean, what you've been doing there is incredible, but it's not just about, I mean, amazing as you are, Damian, it's not just about one person, is it? It's about having that buy-in from the senior leadership team. And I think that is so important. And if you don't have that to make this type of approach, then it's just not going to happen. So it sounds like that you've got the perfect pieces are all in place to have enabled this to happen. I know you've been doing it for a few years now. So can you say a little bit more about how you managed to get that interest, you know, where the leadership was coming from that in the school?
Yeah, we
budgets, does it, and everything else. You know, it's a real commitment.
Yeah, we're really fortunate. You know, our head is very supportive of what we do here, and with the sort of when we've recently moved into a new build school in the last 8 years, and the vision going forward, we've always sort of been very equal to seeing the role of the iPad with the students and where it's going to lead. So I think the support from senior management has been absolutely amazing, and the buy-in into the licenses, and I know Dave's going to perhaps talk about something about that later, but you know, if we didn't have the support with the licenses and the ability then to run the full version of Concepts right through our exam classes, then I don't think we would have been able to push things as far as we can. Now, you can still get very good results using the trial version of Concepts, and that's how we, you know, start to introduce the students. And then if they buy into it, then we put them onto our licenses, which we have purchased in the past. And like I said, again, if we didn't have the support from management, then we wouldn't have been able to push this as far as we have. So we're very fortunate within the school to have the backing to explore this sort of avenue.
Well, maybe that's a good point to bring you back in then, Dave. I mean, I don't know. So there's a couple of questions there. The first one was, from your side of things at Concepts, do you see what's being achieved at the school? Do you see it happening very often? I mean, how unusual is it? And I don't know if you did want to say anything more about the licenses, but I just wondered if I could bring you there in your perspective.
Well, let me start with the licenses. So we're making it a lot easier for schools and educational institutions to license Concepts going forward, because we're making it free. So if you're a teacher, staff at a school or university, then email education@concepts.app. And we have a kind of validation process, but once you've gone through that, then you know, you can get access to all the features of Concepts for no cost. So that hopefully should make it much easier for schools to roll it out. And you know, one of the things we have found is one of the barriers is paying for licenses. You know, schools often manage to get devices through grant programs or something like that. So iPads, for example, or or Chromebooks or other tablets, but then they don't have any budget for software. So, you know, the joined up thinking is not always, or the mechanisms for funding have not always been there to make sure all of this stuff actually, you know, knits together properly. So we're looking to help make that happen. You know, I think one of the powerful pieces of you know what Damian said is the kids like it. So once if the kids are using it and getting value from it, and you're taking the tool across disciplines, you know, because that's what we really want. This, you know, thinking visually is how a large part of the population think, and if we're helping kids who think visually first to do better at school, that, you know, that's awesome. And it is, you know, a large part of what we've tried to build with Concepts. It's, you can do art in Concepts, and lots of people use it for art, but that's not the primary purpose of Concepts. It's a very broad kind of tool that you can use for visual thinking, you know, mood boarding, pulling in images, marking up documents. I mean, you know, and by having one tool that does all of these different things, you can kind of learn the skill and then just apply it really, really broadly.
Across
and so
that it helps the thinking.
Exactly, yeah. So when it works, the investment, you know, in terms of the kids learning that tool, hopefully then pays off, you know, really widely.
It always reminds me when I was at school, and I wanted, if I was doing a history exam or a maths exam, it didn't matter what it was, I would want to be allowed, because we weren't allowed, I would want to be allowed to draw out my answer in some way. You know, draw out, so if it was a history essay on, I don't know, Henry VIII's wives or whatever, I would want to sort of draw out how I was going to, you know, what the chunks were, what I was going to put in.
Right.
I had to, for me to be able to do it, I needed to visualize it. And with maths and everything, I have to do it like that. I'm constantly having to scribble and doodle. But of course we weren't allowed, because we weren't allowed to make any notes. You had to, and I just find that, looking back now, I just find it, you know, incredibly frustrating. I think limiting, and it's lovely that I hope that children are have a little bit more flexibility at school. But although I still do hear, there was just a thread on Twitter with the big draw the other day that, you know, kids not being able to doodle in class because it's seen as being they're not concentrating, whereas actually it's probably the reverse. It's probably actually helping them concentrate. But if there's a tool like this, and there's a system that you have, like you have set up, Damian, where actually that's part and parcel of the thinking, and not only can they capture that thinking in the moment, then they can sort of almost lift it up and drop it into something else and share it. It becomes a very powerful tool and way of thinking, as you say, not just about even art or design or maths or anything specific, more just about how they think and how they develop their problem solving skills, how they approach things, how they collaborate with their colleagues, but with their peer crew. You know, it's incredibly powerful. I mean, coming back to you for a second, Damian, and just one of the things that I didn't really know anything about, you mentioned the other day, just you were talking about some of the well, you were talking about dyslexia actually, and some of the accessibility tools as well, and some of the things that you've been thinking about in your school around recognizing that actually, you know, kids do learn in different ways, and whether they're doing it analog on pencil and paper or whether they're doing iPad, there still may be a whole range of different accessibility challenges. I wondered if you wanted to say any more about that.
Yeah, you know, like I say, we've got our own ALN students, and there's many areas of the iPad that we teach them to use so they can access the curriculum. So things like speak to text, and like we were chatting about in the week with Siri, because what we were finding when we're doing sort of the written work with some of the students, spell check just simply wouldn't cut it, because their actual words did not appear anything like they would, because of their challenges. So what we've been teaching them to use a lot is Siri. So they've been asking Siri to spell things and then copy and pasting that area into their documents. And you know, there's so many things like that. The filters then for people to go over the top of the screens. So yeah, the iPad is such a versatile tool if it's taught to be used in the right way. Doing their own video blogs instead of having to write things down, and they can record themselves discussing something. And a lot of the time we're using the iPads to save time with their workflow, so they can create things far quicker. They can get far more professional outcomes, using a range of different apps. So with the iPad, has been such a great learning tool for our school across all areas. And I think, we've still got so much more to learn with it.
Yeah. And I think just going back to when we were talking a little bit, I was saying this thing about I'm often asked at the big draw. It always tends to be very polarized, which I find quite strange, but they'll be very passionate, and they'll say, well, I think that if you go on an iPad, that's really limiting, and it should all be done on, paper, pencil and paper, because you just can't do it properly. Or at the other end of the spectrum, saying, it should all be digital. People saying, I mean, we come across people regularly who say, if it's drawing on an iPad, it's not real drawing as well. You sort of want to say, well, do you think if you don't have the same skill you have with a pencil and paper, you're not going to have the same skill. It doesn't suddenly have the skill on the iPad when you're drawing. I don't know. It's quite a strange one. But obviously, it's much more intermeshed than that. So I think with all of this, I mean, with the people that are on the call, we're not, I suppose all three of us, we're not saying this is the sort of the holy grail, but it's an incredible tool, isn't it, that can be embedded across learning as a bit of a leveler, but for children, but to give them a whole range of different skills. I suppose it's about giving people the options to be able to do things in different ways, because I mean, Damian, if kids wanted to start off, they may well start off with a simple hand-drawn sketch of something, mightn't they? And then they might want to lift that, and then that might end up being digital. So it's not excluding, there's different ways of doing it, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Do you find that the kids who are nervous initially about wanting to go on the iPad, do you find that they start off with the drawing and then they sort of almost find that you're able to bring them in?
So my advice to other people who are trying to introduce concepts is don't get them to try and draw their own work first, because they need to learn the app and they need to learn the features of the app first. So what we get them to do If we're getting them to do a particular product or project, we'll get them to trace a few examples to start with. So for example, my current year 9 engineers, they're producing a little key torch which is themed by a Nintendo character. So they will copy and paste the Mario or wherever into their screen. And what we get them to do then, we start them introducing them to the tools. So we show them how to use layers. We show them how to fade out that layer. And then we get them straight away using the pencil tool. So we get them to use the pencil and get it to a sort of thickness and a style that's just like pencil or paper. And we get them to sketch very loosely over the top. And then we'll get them to sort of select another layer, and then we'll show them the pen tool, and they will go around the outside, and we'll show them the accuracy and smoothing tools, so that their drawings start to become very, very, very accurate, and they get a sense of pride then. So what we do, we build their confidence through tracing. And once that confidence has been built and they've learned some of the very basic tools, you soon start to see them flourish. And, you know, I've put a couple of videos together in some of the blogs, and, you know, we were only talking to one of the teachers the other day. Once they start to get it, if you stand back and watch them, the way that they're zooming in and out, and they're selecting with different pencils, and you know at that point they've got it. So it's that introduction to start with has to be right, because if you don't get that hook, you know, they're not going to take it to the next level. So when we were initially starting out with the transition from traditional to digital, what we were doing is also rewarding them. So if they produce some project work or just lunch club work, we would take pictures of that and just share it all over Twitter, because we're all about sharing good practice. But then we made some little laser cut trophies for them, and we had Digital Designer of the Month, which we would then share over Twitter with our local community and, you know, with the Apple community, and they just loved it. And it's getting them, you know, involved and feeling worthwhile, that they're doing something that's really great, really. And very, very quickly, you know, they will just flow with it then. And when they're at that stage, you know, they will then start to do their own work, but then you can start introducing some of the more complex skills and layering techniques. And so what we did then, we've introduced our own sort of booklets and tutorials then that we'll share with them, and they can work through to get to the higher level. But that's how we sort of introduce it. I think having them to draw something straight away and say, well, there's the pencil tool, there's the pen tool, you're not going to get very good results. You have to be very careful in the way that you get them involved in the sketching.
Can I ask a question? I mean, I wonder if this ties into kind of getting over the perfectionism. I mean, you know, one of the challenges I think when you start to draw is, well, my stuff looks rubbish, you know, and that's then a barrier to doing anything, right? How do you get kids over that kind of hurdle?
Well, I think that's what helps with the tracing, because, you know, they're following something that's already there, and 9 times out of 10 their designs look really good at the end. So there is slight differentiation in outcome. However, you know, the majority of those students will succeed very quickly in that first stage. And I think that eliminates that fear then of, I can't draw, I can't use this, I'm no good on iPads. And, you know, working through step by step, working together at the initial stages is also very important, I think.
Really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you know, David, that, I mean, I can't draw. I mean, that is what the big drawing team, I mean, literally every day, from somebody or other, a partner or somebody ringing up for something. Yeah, he's just like, oh. It's a bit like, where do we start with that? Because obviously there is this horrible ingrained thing in people that when you say drawing, they're immediately thinking about some sort of very beautiful, traditionally aesthetic, you know, that like something, I don't know, that Leonardo da Vinci did, or
right.
You know, Matty did something, you know, it's like, and if it's something that's much more, well, is much more conceptual, is much about thinking out an idea. So whether it's more of a sketch to work out maybe for a building design or a jumper design or whatever it might be, in some way they don't see that as drawing or mark making, but of course it's just a different type.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, the sketches I do while I'm coding are unintelligible to anyone else, but
Yeah.
and even by me probably half an hour later. But as I was using them, they helped me solve problems, and they helped me, think through, and it doesn't matter. I mean,
I think you raise a really good point there, because that's really important, isn't it? That the drawings that people do, the sketches, the scribbles they do, whatever you want to call them, the marks with meaning, they don't have to be shared. They don't have to be for a public audience. They couldn't just be for you. And they're just purely about you are honing your thinking, or they're helping you work through a problem, or whatever it might be. It might be a personal problem. It might be an engineering problem. It doesn't matter. So again, there's a sort of a misconception that this sort of weird feeling that everything has to be sort of perfect and finished and done. And I think it's, and you see it in the school system. I mean, my two kids, it's like, oh, I can't do it because I made a mistake once, and so that means I can't do it. It's like, well, maybe try another 100 times, and then, if you still can't do it, let's work on it together.
Right.
You've got to practice it. You can't just get it like that. So I think it's something we see an awful lot at the big draw, and the fear of the clear page. So when you were talking, Damon, I was imagining, you've got the kids that are saying, oh, I can't draw, and they're so frightened of that empty white page. But I suppose if they do something, they don't like it, often they'll oh, I hate it. But of course, on an iPad, you can just do undo, and it's not as stressful. So there's something there, I think, as well, in that, in that flexibility there as well. I wanted to just quickly come back, because I will be told off by the team if I don't mention it. You sort of started just to touch on a few of the features, Damian, a little bit earlier. And what I do need to just say to everyone on the call is two things: is that the Big Draw has a blog, a lovely blog with Damian that is out there on our website, which goes into a bit of detail. So do please check that out. But also, the Big Draw and the Concepts and Damian, we have a Zoom webinar coming up on, I believe it's Wednesday the 25th of May. So hopefully I've got that right. And maybe Eleanor or Sandra, if they're on the call, could pop it in the chat. And I think the intention is that, you'll be talking a little bit more about concepts and tools and tips and all those sorts of things. So do keep an eye out for that. I just wanted to go back to impact and benefit to the students. And I think impact is a difficult one, because like so many things, it's hard often to measure the distance traveled, isn't it, with kids, in any curriculum, unless it's becoming very, very, a bit like it is in the UK anyway, if it's very, very, and then it's like you get points for this, and it's all Ofsted, it's all the rest of it. So often, if it is a bit more pioneering, I think it can be quite tricky to evidence impact and measure the distance travelled. And I know when we talked a little bit about this the other day, Damian, I was really curious to know let's just say that the school was wanting to present this to Parliament and say, look at what we're doing. Look at the impact, So how would you begin to evidence what you have done? I mean, you can see, I know that a lot of the kids that are going through those progression routes through, they are going on into a range of creative industries roles, aren't they? And you can see that happening. But is there anything, what other ways are you being, as the school, able to sort of hold its hand and say, look at the impact we're having on these kids?
Well, we were only looking at the other day, when we set out our work for for our current classes, and we've always got a folder of exemplars that we can share on the screen, and we were looking at some of the top levels that we've had within the last 2-3 years, and you can already see the impact that designing fully digitally has had. The standard of work is far higher. The level of detail is far higher, but also the workflow, the amount of work that we can complete has, the time has reduced greatly, because they can, very quickly manipulate and duplicate and even share with us for us to mark. Now, it also allows us the ability to mark and assess and even draw with them. It's very quick copy and paste or duplicate a sheet, draw with them over the top, and then they can work then at their own pace, or we can just email it to them for working at a later date. So when we're looking at the standards of drawing, the standards of presentation has greatly increased, and with a very busy curriculum, we've managed to save a lot of time. Traditionally, if we were producing a project of work, they'd have to print it out in color, they'd have to cut and paste and prepare a border. Now that's done in seconds. There's so many areas that has made an impact. And if you want to talk about budgets, becoming a fully iPad school has saved us roughly around £80,000 a year on just photocopying.
Is it really? Just on photocopy?
Yeah.
Wow.
If it's managed correctly and with everyone on board, like our head has led this from day one. All staff are on board with iPads, and that's a massive saving. We've just stopped leasing a huge amount of our photocopiers now because everything is fully digital. So there's massive gains to be made there. But like you touched on, it's also more about the future jobs, the future skills. The amount of students that come back to us that have gone into design degrees or college and coming back and saying their lecturers have asked, well, how do you do that? Where did you learn those skills? How have you been using this? Who's taught you that? And they say, well, that's just school. That's what we do. So we know we're onto something good, and we know that we're providing these students with these future skills. So I think that there's a lot of benefits there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, pretty much every job now, you're going to need to have a basic level of, pulling a presentation together, manipulating visual. I mean, it's going to happen. That's just the way it is, isn't it? And increasingly it will be that. And I think when we were chatting the other day, I was sort of saying that, in terms of all the evidence, all the academic data and everything is all pointing to more and more and more of these types of jobs in the creative industries, visual, probably more virtual. When kids my age, 11 and 12, when they're 20s, we were saying the other day, so many of those jobs, about 70 to 80% of jobs, they don't even exist at the moment. I just found that amazing. They don't exist. They'll be making them up. Their peer group will be making these new jobs up that we can't even conceive because we're all too old, basically. And they will be coming up with them, but they will need the right skills, won't they? And so, without wanting to get on sort of a big rant, me on my high horse, about what the things that I think are lacking in our current education system, I think in terms of the types of skills that they will need, it's not learning by rote, and it's not learning, it's learning how to learn, isn't it? It's learning how to learn, and it's learning how to, you need to be able to operate in a digital environment. And increasingly visual worlds, you need to be able to work visually, as well as manage the data and manipulate the data. You need to be able to present. You need to be able to work collaboratively. All of these things are such core skills, and are being identified more and more and more. These critical thinking, problem solving skills is where all the jobs are going to be. So I suppose the question would be, and I know it's a provocative one, I would say to you both, why are more schools not doing, not necessarily exactly the same, because there's probably lots of different ways that this could be done, but why do you think more schools are not a bit more open to embracing some of the things that you've been talking about?
I think it's mainly down to costs and budgets is the big issue, and there's also the fear of, I think because there's not many schools going in this direction yet, I think it's the fear of making that first step. But you've got to have good management. You've got to have everyone on board. Now, we were fortunate that we were having a newly built school. So what they did, they budgeted into the new build the cost of the iPads and the MacBooks for all the school students and staff. Now they had a full plan ahead then for a 3-year refresh of the iPads. Parents pay, I think it's £40 for insurance and a specialist case that is very robust for the iPads. But then after 3 years, those iPads were due to be refreshed. Now, we managed to stretch that to 4, and we looked at some different sort of models to finance the new refresh of the iPads. And what we found now is far cheaper to lease. So we're actually leasing our current iPads, And due to the advances in technology, we're now into the 4th year of these iPads, and they're still running really, really well. You know, and you can tell when the students value these iPads, especially in the design areas, when they come into school having purchased their own Apple Pencil. Now, they don't have to have an Apple Pencil. It's their choice. We provide some of the cheaper stylus during the design lessons, but I think with my own form, where we originally started, when I did the sort of lunch clubs, I think the first Christmas, I think every student came back with an Apple Pencil after Christmas.
Yeah.
You can see that they wanted to invest in it, and it's the same right across. The staff are all on board. It is a big thing to look at, but there are ways that schools can buy into the iPads, and I think a lot of schools as well, they're very quick to buy the cheapest option, and it's not always the best with regards to new technology. An iPad will do everything that a PC will do and more, but schools tend to look at the cheapest models around, and I think sometimes that's not always the best way.
What about you, Dave? Did you have a...
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, the business world is still struggling with this transition. Obviously with the pandemic and remote work, and the whole world is being challenged as to whether there are better and different ways of working. And when you're not in the same place and maybe not working with people who have the same culture or background as you, then visual communication becomes even more important. So it's fascinating what you mentioned, Damian, about like the video blogs and allowing that, because that's being rolled out into some of the tools used by business these days as a way of asynchronously sharing status updates, as opposed to having to type up a report. Tools are coming out now that allow you just to record a 2-3 minute video that is your update for the team, so that your team can kind of watch it back when they want. So I think Damian's ahead of many businesses in terms of what's being done in his school, but I'm convinced it's the future. The familiarity with all of these kind of multimedia tools and preparing the kids to be able to use them effectively. I mean, you can do these jobs without having these skills. It's just about how effective you are, which means how fast you progress in your career and the opportunities that are going to open up for you. And I think you're preparing kids to be better prepared for success.
Just looking at the chat. So Willie, so that's the architect's sketchbooks, but the first thing I bought during lockdown was a really big graphics display tablet, which facilitated communication with my team. I see it as a great way to communicate remotely. Yeah, I think that's sort of echoing what you're saying, really. I mean, just in terms, I want to just pick out a little bit about the interdisciplinary, which I know we've touched on, and you've touched on a little bit as well, Damian, earlier. And in terms of when you're obviously you have a curriculum, you still have to hit on the curriculum. You have to, everything has to be. Do you find that being able to teach in a more cross-cutting interdisciplinary way does help children to be able to learn more in subjects perhaps they're a little bit weaker at?
I think, well, for me, I'm a big fan of the technology, so I think for me, yes, it helps in many ways. Going back to both the teaching and the learning side, you can give so much advice to the students as they work along through a little voice note, or that's personal to them, which they fully enjoy picking up and listening to, rather than reading something that you've spent 10 minutes typing up. You watch the way that they work outside of the classroom. They got their phones, they're on their own blogs. It is the way of the future, isn't it? So
communicate, isn't it? And it's playful. It's a very playful way of learning and teaching, isn't it, as well? And as you say, it just dovetails with that's what they do. That is how they operate all the time.
And I think sometimes as educators, it's us that needs to change. When you're giving voice feedback, you hate the sound of your own voice when you're giving feedback to these students. But they'll just pick that up in the yard or on the bus on the way to school, and they'll just listen to what you've said, and they're far more receptive to listening to something or watching a little video of you recording, you know, how to improve their work, rather than reading an essay that you've written and spent a lot of time on. And so I think, you know, it helps across all subject areas, working in this sort of way. And I think, you know, it reduces workload, you know, for the teachers, and I think it is, you know, has far more impact on their learning.
Yeah.
Do your iPads, do you provide keyboards with them? Is that, you know, how do you kind of...
We've trialed keyboards, and in some areas they will use a keyboard, but the majority of the students, they're happy just using the screens. You know, you watch how fast their thumbs work when they're messaging their friends. They can produce, they can get things typed up very, very quickly.
Yeah, no, I've just heard from a number of schools that's one of the things that becomes a hang up for kind of choosing iPad over alternatives, is, you know, or tablets in general versus, you know, a traditional laptop.
Yeah, we did experiment at the start. You know, even myself, I had an iPad Pro with a keyboard, and I got to be honest, I probably used it 3 times in the 3 years that I had that keyboard. It depends on what you want to get out of it. For us in schools, then the iPad is working perfectly as it is. Some staff now are investigating using the new sort of MacBook style keyboard that allows you to, you know, you have the best of both worlds. Then you've got a touchscreen and you've got the, you know, the efficiency of a Mac. But we find the iPad can do everything that we need and more.
Just seen there's another, so CPersa08 has said, I love using concepts in my lessons. That's nice to hear. I mean, I would imagine that David, and I know I would love to hear about anybody on the call who is using concepts in their teaching lessons or whatever else, actually, successfully. If there is anybody that is using it on a regular basis in a learning environment. Just having a quick look through the chat. I would love to find a really good HD wireless network downward looking secondary webcam for meeting. Right. I don't know if anybody can help with that one.
Well, I mean, with the iPad and Concepts, you can connect to kind of AirPlay receivers. So apps like Zoom and Meet allow the iPad to connect in to meetings. So it's a useful tip if you are looking to share. And Concepts recognizes when there's a second screen like that connected and kind of adapts. So there are definitely ways of you know, sharing your screen via most of the messaging apps that are available. We have a tutorial. If you search for Concepts app Zoom, I think you'll probably find the tutorial article.
So look, I think a question to both of you would be, so if I ask you first, really, Devin, so I mean, what next for you? I mean, you know, you've been teaching for quite a while, and you know, you obviously embedded this whole way of learning and been pioneering this approach in the school. So what's next on the?
So
are you going to have to spread the oracle? I mean, what's next for you with it all?
Well, for us now, we know that it's fully embedded, and we can now open this out to all areas of the school, because we no longer have to purchase the licenses. We are investigating the summer term now of transferring their work from a line drawing into something that we can take straight into the laser cutter. We've worked out how to take it into the 3D printer software using the line tool. So it's something within our projects that it's personal to us with how our workflow, but we'd like to have everything just from the iPad, from Concepts, and then straight to the laser. Because what we're doing at the moment, we're sketching ideas, and then we're using a secondary software on a PC to convert or to redraw, recreate that sketch to go to the laser cutter. Now we know we can do it, but it's coming up with a workflow that works, that we could do with a full class. That's not gonna impact on the time spent by staff. So coming back to, you know, the impact side, if it's going to take more steps than we already do, then, you know, we won't do it. But I'm sure that we can get that together. So myself and one of my other colleagues are going to be, once we got the exam classes out of the way now over the next couple of weeks, that's going to be our summer project, is taking it straight through to maybe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator. If the students can email us their work, and then we can run the laser cutter off that. And that was one of the big draws that sort of brought me into Concepts in the first place, is one of the promotional videos from many years ago of a designer that was designing a lamp, David, I'm sure you remember, sitting out on this, you know, this beautiful sunrise on this mountain, and then his sketch goes through to the development stage, and then eventually there's this beautiful lamp that's sort of water jet cut at the end, and it was that sort of workflow that I thought, well, yes, that's our aim, that's our vision of where we want to go. So we're almost there with our classes, but not quite yet. But yeah, so that's going to be the next step now, is so that we can use Concepts fully and take it to the final sort of product.
Yeah, excited to see how you do that, and please get in touch if there's stuff that you know, we can help with in smoothing that workflow.
I'd love to see the end products as well. And what about you, David?
Yeah,
You've already announced some, you know, amazing news. But anything else?
I mean, so you know, our big focus at the moment is taking Concepts beyond iPad and iPad OS, and you know, we're spending a lot of time bringing the same features to Windows and kind of Microsoft-based tablets, and Android and Chrome OS and tablets there. And we've been working on it for a few years, but you know, it's really coming together this year. Very regular releases, and so regardless of which platform you work on, you hopefully can get the full, you know, experience, the full power of Concepts. So that's kind of our big mission for this year. And you know, beyond that, getting Concepts files into the cloud and simplifying collaboration, I guess, are other big initiatives for us. And all the time, you know, trying to make the product itself more intuitive, you know, make those workflows quicker. I mean, you know, what Damian was saying, that's kind of one of our fundamental, you know, kind of rules is, you know, how do we make this thing as efficient as possible, so there are as few steps, a few annoying pop-ups as possible in the way that, you know, it just kind of works.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just mindful of the time. We've probably got about 5 minutes left before we come to the end of our hour, and I'm just checking my notes. We've definitely mentioned the blog, and we've definitely mentioned the Zoom webinar on Wednesday the 25th of May. Does anybody on the chat, just trying to see if I've missed any questions, but is there anybody that's on the call with us that would like to ask any questions of either Damian or David? If you would, please put it in now. So we've got Love Concepts app, cloud service sounds amazing. So more love for you, David.
To remind people about the email address, if your staff, faculty at a school or university, college, email education@concepts.app so we can get your school set up with Concepts.
And to see if anybody knows, so no one's put any questions in. Must have both been so thorough. I suppose it would just be that if people did want to find out more, so obviously you've given the email, but you know, it's easy enough to find the website, isn't it? Just people go online. Obviously you're on Instagram and Twitter and everything, so they'll be able to find out. But there's loads on resources, isn't there, on David? And so that you're very easy to find. And similarly, Damian, you have some resources I think people could look at. Do you not?
Yeah, we got some books published on the Apple Store that are free for people to download. You know, you can find us on Twitter at CyresDT, and if you look at our school at St. Cyres School, you know, you will find a lot more of what's going on with iPads to give you a better flavour of our overall vision of what we're creating. We intend probably doing a refresh now of some of our tutorial books with, you know, with the new sort of workflow that Concepts has put together, and you know, from our experience now, the sort of tutorials that we're now using with our students, we're going to put together in a book for other staff to follow, and hopefully that'll be coming out soon. And again, everything will be shared via Twitter, so if you follow us on Twitter, you'll see the updates when they're ready, and you can just download them. There'll be links then to download from the Apple bookstore.
Yeah, I'm just checking it. So all very thorough. Eleanor, thank you for putting that in. So Ella said again, she's put the email in the chat, so if people are still struggling to find that. But I think, and similarly, if people want to find out more about the big draw, we're very easy to find as well. So we're on pretty much everything, every social media platform. Obviously, we have a couple of websites. So please do. And oh yeah, thank you, Eleanor. Eleanor's also put your resources on, Damian. So the link there is for your resources. Oh, there is a question that's just popped up. What's the best way to contribute as a user on the Windows platform? From Brathering93. And probably for you, David.
Not quite sure what the question means. Contribute. I mean, if in terms of feedback, then contacting our support team. We're always keen to hear feedback, and you know, if you have questions, so support@concepts.app is the best way to, and we take feedback there as well.
Okay. What are the names of the books on Apple Store? I think that's one for you, Damian.
Off the top of my head, I'd have to have a look. These are a few years old now. But if you, I can put them in the links later. I can send them, and then you can download them direct. I think that one of them was introducing digital sketching at St. Cyres School. And then there's a book on how to create sort of trainer designs. Now, what we were finding is when we were originally looking at getting students into using the app, it was looking at topics that, you know, that all sort of ages and genders sort of like. And one thing the students really love is to draw their favorite trainers. So we've put together a book on how to create a Nike Air Max outline, and it teaches you how to use layers and change colors. And then the students go off and then they do their Converse and they do their Adidas Superstars and all the, you know, the Nike Air Force One, and we give them those sort of skills. So there's a book on that, and then there's another book where we take things further, which has got a VW camper van. So we show them a range of further tools there. And they're all available through my links. So we'll put them up at the end then, so they can find them directly on the bookstore.
And also, if people don't see them, then that will encourage them, Damian, to come to the Zoom webinar on Wednesday, the 25th of May, because we also really want people to come to that as well. So someone's already found the introduction to the digital sketching. So I think we're just coming up to our last couple of minutes. So I wanted to thank you both for being absolutely fantastic, very charming, lovely guests. And I wondered if you had any final words before we draw it to a close.
I think from me, if you are using the app, then don't try to, you know everything. Learn with the students. We often find that we haven't got as much time as educators to try everything, and especially when you're trying something new, is say, right, we're going to learn this together, guys. We're new to this. Let's try this today. And 9 times out of 10, you'll get the students will come back and say, oh, sir, I found this last night. Look at this new tool. And what I usually do is I'll get them to role model that particular skill or you know, something that they found, and they will show that to the others in the class. So that then will build confidence, and they feel like, you know, part of a team, and we're all pulling together. So I never, you know, say that I've got all the answers. You know, we will investigate. And I think that when you're new to some sort of app or technology, it's always good to just be open with the students and just say, I don't know the answers. Let's try it. Let's see what works.
I love that. We will investigate. Yeah, it's going back to that idea of everything I go to at the moment on education meetings, they're all talking about co-learning, co-creation. Everything's co these days, but I think it's good. You know, it's trying to move away from exactly what you were just saying there, Damian. This idea that the teacher should be expected to be this sort of all being ball of knowledge, when of course we're all learning all the time anyway, when actually often the kids have got the best ideas anyway. So it's much more of we'll all learn together and we'll work it through together. And I think that's lovely. I think the only thing I wanted to say before we clock off is that for anybody who is still with us, if you are using Concepts already, do share any of your lovely sketches or drawings or anything that you've done on Concepts app with us at the big draw. So if you tag us on Twitter or Instagram, then we'll be able to see them and then we can share them. So that would be my final word. Please share your work with us. We'd love to see it and hear more about it. So I think we've just gone 1 minute over our hour, but thank you so much to everybody. What I should have said at the beginning was, obviously, as you all know, this is being recorded, so it's going to be sat on the Big Draw Instagram account, the videos as an asset. It will stay on there. So if you know people that have missed it, couldn't come, maybe the time zone difference, whatever, do let them know, and then maybe you could point them in the right direction so they could watch it another time. So, and we will also be lifting it and we'll be putting it onto YouTube as well, so we'll be able to share it more widely from there as well. So thank you so much, you both. You're both amazing, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you all both very soon. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Damian. It's a lot of fun.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Bye.
Bye.